Hi, this is Fred Craven, stage manager at Harmonic Software Production Studios. We're getting ready to start. Hang in there, and we'll be right back.
Hi. So welcome to Harmonic's Brain Trust on this glorious Friday the 13th. And we are going to be discussing lots of things around the topic of collaboration. And I'm hoping to basically, as this is a brain trust, dive into with the group and get group participation on this topic, because what's the point of one single person blathering on about collaboration? We should talk about it together. So, title of the talk is Collaboration, or Why Is It Important That I Know That You Know That I Know? So, hopefully we'll have the answer to that question at the end of this. Why is this a brain trust? Because I want to harbor discussions in this time about improvement. I want to, as a group and as a larger group, identify some opportunities for improvement. How do we continually improve our teamwork and collaboration is kind of what this is about. And I want to specifically dive in and discuss some of the impediments to collaboration that are unique to FileMaker or development shop, because there are some, and that's part of our journey. Is we're half FileMaker shop, half a lot of other stuff shop, and those two folks, much like a sculptor and a painter, do things very differently. So we're going to kind of tease that apart. But I wanted to start with, as all good presentations do, some kind of quote, right? So Steve Jobs, great things in business are never done by one person, they're done by a team of people. I called it the ironic quote of the day because some people view this as an ironic thing that Steve Jobs has said, because he's just such a megalomaniac, or was, that he is perceived as doing it my way or get off the road. But in fact, he several times in his career engendered a large team of people to do pretty remarkable things. And some of those things are kind of hidden underneath some history, like if you dig into Next Computers and kind of discover some of the things that they did, there's some pretty remarkable things that he did there. And obviously the team that kind of came up with the iPhone and did some of those things, a lot of that stuff involved an awful lot of teamwork. And so it is ironic in a sense that someone that's looked at as being sort of an egomaniac said something like that. But in reality, with what he did, I think we can look at that and go, well, he knew how to make some good teams at times. So let's start with a definition of collaboration, because we got to jump off here somewhere. So I'm calling this an affective definition of collaboration. So there are a few words in the English language that are as situationally malleable as the word collaboration. In the context of cleaning up a mess created by a theoretical Great Dane with explosive gastrointestinal distress, the suggestion for collaboration from others in my house was quite welcome. In the context of enjoying the last little square of my favorite salted caramel dark chocolate bar, the suggestion of collaboration by my two young daughters was vexing. So, I would argue that collaboration is so very situationally malleable, and the definition of collaboration depends widely based on how we are feeling. But an effective definition of collaboration could be two or more people working together cooperatively, especially in a joint effort for a common purpose to achieve additional or enhanced benefit. In other words, an optimist wrote this definition. So, why does talking about collaboration cause groaning, consternation, and FUD? Or how do we tend to envision the responsibility part of collaboration without envisioning the benefit part of it? I have three thoughts. I'm going to jump off here, and this is the first discussion point we're about to get to. My three thoughts are, why does this cause groaning? Rigor, tedium, and vulnerability. So let's tease those apart for just a second. Really, when it comes to thinking about all the tasks in front of me, increasing the time, effort needed to execute the task rarely feels like progress. Adding rigor to any process, especially if it gives off a vibe of being perfunctory or bureaucratic, seems counterintuitive. And after all, improving efficiency is supposedly a virtue, right? So, can anyone say TPS reports? Everybody got that? In an archaic command control style management, which is really what the Office Space movie kind of portrayed in its kind of two characters there. The reports always go up. They rarely go out. They never go down. Command and control benefits diligence at the expense of creativity. The requisition forms, the after-action reports, the field reports, the cover sheets for the TPS reports are the definition of tedium in an office environment, right? And my third thought, going down the line of where we come at this thinking, being concerned about talking about collaboration, is that really, I think developers have a predilection. They prefer to be viewed as the jack of all trades, or the fighter mentality, right? I get in my plane, I do my thing, I drop my bombs, I go home, right? You could call it the lone wolf mentality. So to admit to wanting to collaborate risks admitting that you need someone else's help. I remember reading this quote a long time ago, and I thought it was fascinating because Ross McCammon was basically poking fun at this. To collaborate with another person is to admit weakness. There's no way of getting around it. If you weren't in a position of weakness, you wouldn't need anyone else's help. When engaging in a collaboration, you're saying, I don't know how to do this on my own. You're both saying that you're co-failing, really. It's kind of such an obvious over-the-top kind of caricature of the situation. It kind of, breaks it up and realizes, okay, well, yes, so maybe there is a little bit of that, but aren't we also really? And that's part of the fun of that quote.
There's a part, little Steve, there's a part that really resonates with this, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Right? And I think if you go back to your third point, the lone wolf or the fighter pilot, we have within our organization, and I think within our group of developers culturally, we're a bunch of doers and makers. So if you're a doer and a maker, you somehow figured out how to get it done, right? How to be the one on the team of 3 in the science class that actually did the work.
That's
right? And so I think we have this sense from early on, this deep-seated sense that collaboration means I'm towing dead weight.
Yeah.
Right? And it shouldn't mean that. It obviously doesn't mean that definitionally in any positive sense, but I think there's this kind of child reaction to the notion of collaboration. Collaboration means I'm just doing their work too.
Yeah.
From junior high.
Yeah, and that was true at times, right? So Steve did a great job of jumping the discussion gun, but this is exactly where we wanted to go, is to engender this conversation, right? So in these discussion points, I've picked a few, but also let's just break it out. I wanted to start with the FileMaker environment, not just the dev environment, the tool set also, but also just the environment that we use to do FileMaker. How does this exacerbate this issue? Does it alleviate this issue? Does it create unique obstacles for collaboration? And really, let's go back a step and say, does any of what I've said so far resonate, or does it kind of sound like noise? What do you guys think?
I agree with it. I agree that when I hear the word collaboration, my instincts go here from school.
Yeah.
Which is not the reality and experience I've had in collaborating with many of the team members here. So it's a very interesting dichotomy, because emotionally someone's like, you have to collaborate with them on a project. I'm like, okay, but do I really? But then I actually go and work with the person. I'm like, this was great. We got so much more done. They had all these cool viewpoints I wouldn't have thought to incorporate, and now my art is so much better. So it's this weird, barrier of entry to get over every time, and it's taller and shorter depending on the person I'm working with and how much I've worked with them before.
Yeah. And collaborative things like this in junior high, we brought up, they've failed, and so we've got that as this is what happens when collaboration looks bad. So yeah, there is that at the front of collaboration, a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about how is this going to sway? Is this going to...
You haven't experienced, like the teacher in the room failed to create an environment where there was healthy collaboration. So you experienced the authority figure in charge basically dropping the ball.
Right.
And so then there's that inherent lack of trust to whoever the authority figure is now, or whoever's in charge, that you're just the one doing all the work.
Is collaboration really something that, bringing up the command control style of running a company, does it really mean to people, I'm going to foist tedium and needless work on you in the name of collaboration, right? So there is that.
Right.
Sure.
Because one reaction might be, you've got to turn in, your practice log, and you're both on the team, but I'm going to weight your grade separately based on the number of minutes you spent.
Yeah.
Well, Okay, I mean, that's one way to try to approach the did Eric do all of the work problem, right? But it's not really solving the problem, it's just applying yet another layer of bureaucracy to what's really not at the heart of the issue.
Yeah.
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 So, okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I skipped as much school as I could, so I relate more to the lone wolf scenario than the I'm carrying other people's dead weight, because I would get out of that if that was what looked like was gonna happen. But, I definitely, I see both sides of it. I see the negative, and I think that the redefining of it has to happen for all of us, because I think we were all scarred by junior high. So we gotta
No question about it.
We've gotta start over.
It's kind of like that's why it's there.
This bullet point, really, it's an interesting question, and the thing I would call out is that FileMaker, in a codependent relationship, you've got two facilitators. And FileMaker is in a codependent relationship with us where it tells us anyone can do anything. And so I think there's this kind of expectation, especially if you came to FileMaker kind of naturally and just accidentally, shall we say, well, I keep sort of at least succeeding in using this tool to do something, but it really doesn't teach us a proper interdependency, right? Which means, well, I can do web code, right? I know how to go turn on the checkbox that says Web Direct, or whatever it was called before, the instant web publishing.
Right, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, so I can do web code, so I don't need anybody else for that,
Yeah.
right? And I can do ODBC connections, right? As long as one person set up that DSN on the server, man, I'm a MySQL genius.
That's right. Yeah, look
I
at
can
that.
do MySQL, right? So I think there's this double-edged sword of FileMaker's intentional effort to kind of provide accessibility to technology, but it doesn't always do the best thing.
Yeah.
Right? Especially as complexity and scale happen.
Yeah. So something else that is kind of occurring to me as we're talking about this is, as a team, we're really careful not to say things like, all right, Heather, you go in your office and you work on this layout, and Robert, you go over here and you work on the schema, and let's just meet in the middle, right? It's like it's an environment in which all of a sudden you guys are whacking each other in the elbow. It's like the left-hander and the right-hander are eating together, right? It's like you guys are whacking each other in the elbow constantly, and it creates an interesting environment of tedium that is totally artificial, right? It's not that there is no way to work on layouts and schema at the same time. It's just that you're using this tool set, we're now kind of bumping into each other a little bit. So I'd say that there are things we all can identify where FileMaker as an environment, as a tool set, kind of exacerbates the issue of, oh, I got to collaborate, and I got to work on a team, and that kind of stuff. And it does create some unique obstacles. Here's another off of the FileMaker onto the sort of other development paths. Full stack used to be the buzzword. I say used to be. I think it's sort of on its way out. In certain web development circles, where did it go? Right? Why don't we hear full stack, full stack, full stack all the time anymore?
Buzzwords.
Well, there's new buzzwords.
Hundreds of new buzzwords since 2005.
Yeah. I was reading Andy Shora's website blog, and he said for a time, Facebook only hired full stack developers. This was, of course, when they were building their first versions of Facebook, which, let's face it, had a relatively simple PHP backend and wasn't anything special design-wise. His point is, the thing that happened to full stack was the stack changed. It got much bigger. It used to be that we launched a LAMP machine, and that stood for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, except that, well, sometimes it could mean Python. And where does JavaScript and HTML fit? And where does Laravel fit? And where all these is now all of a sudden being a full stack developer? There's no way. No, there's not enough time to be a jack of all those trades. So what happened to full stack? The stack changed, moved, got out of hand. Also, talking about the lone wolf, what's ironic about the perception of a lone wolf? Practically.
Well, don't wolves travel in packs?
They do. They do. It's a myth, right? It's kind of a funny American Wild West myth that kind of got cooked up in story, but a lone wolf doesn't exist. And the wolf that does get shoved out of the pack is a dead wolf. So I don't know where we got this sort of, yeah, I think it's a Western America, this notion that somehow we can go out on a lone and we're much more efficient by ourselves. It doesn't work that way in a practical sense.
Well, I'm relating to the wrong concept then, I guess.
Maybe.
Well, I also think that there's a certain appeal of, going back to full stack as a buzzword is, if you're a company and you're looking to hire developers, like you don't want to hire someone to do front end and someone to do back end and someone to do this and someone to do that. You're like, if I can find someone who's just full stack, then this one person can build me a site like Amazon.com.
Right.
And it's just like, well, no.
Yeah.
That's one person can't actually do that. If you want your website live, within the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
But there's that appeal of, I'll just hire, a handyman, right, who can fix electrical and plumbing and drywall and just everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and suddenly my, 9-story office building is built.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Suddenly. So let's take the globe and move it and look at it from a slightly different perspective. How do we tend to envision collaboration when we kind of take the I'm going to be personally responsible for this out of it, and let's look at it from the benefits. So in other words, how do we envision the benefits of this thing when we don't have to worry about the responsibility? And
When you say responsibility, do you need blame?
That's part of.
So you were the guy that.
That's right.
So this all failed because of me. I'm not gonna let that happen.
That's right. So if you were the kid in junior high doing the group experiment and somebody said, imagine what we can get done with collaboration, and you didn't immediately interpret that as, then it's up to me, what might you think about it? And I have 3 thoughts, again, which I'll throw out and then we'll mix it up. But speed of something, the bandwidth of something, and the distribution of things. So, jumping into those, there are tasks that we can imagine where 2 people can simply cover the same amount of ground faster than one can. So in this situation, I'm thinking of painting, because you're using the same tools, you're on the same plane, and you're just simply cranking it out faster than one person can. Probably not twice as fast, right? A 2-core processor is never twice as fast as a 1-core processor. While any form of teamwork can improve quality and speed, organized workplace collaboration will heighten your overall productivity even more. Tasks are rarely monolithic. They can be divided. Collaboration can mean that the task is finished in a shorter span of time than otherwise could be with one person alone. So, bandwidth. In many cases, 2 people can simply cover more ground in the same amount of time that one person can. It is a slight perspective difference from the first one. Again, thinking of a task of hanging drywall, there's really multiple facets to it. And no one is doing both of those things at the same time. There's just not enough arms. So 2 people hanging drywall, one's cutting, the other one's hanging and papering, right? So again, probably not twice as much ground in the same amount of time. But it is an important distinction from the above illustration of speed. Similarly, a finish line is a very different thing than a deadline, right? So a third slight twist on all this is that it is sometimes necessary for 2 teams to work on other ends of a project, continually re-aim, and meet in the middle. And this is how bridges are built. No one builds a bridge by cantilevering all the way out and at the last moment finally connecting to the other side. I think someone tried it, it failed, and they decided that, nope, no, I think it actually makes more sense to not put all that weight on just one thing for such a long time. So again, this is distinct from the above illustrations of speed versus bandwidth. Each level of co-work takes an increasing amount of overhead in order to perform optimally, right? The more teams we have doing separate things with the hope of meeting in the middle, there's an awful lot of collaboration involved to actually meet in the middle and have it be productive. So yes, it is a small diminishing set of returns, but you're also accomplishing more ground and more speed at the same time. So from a discussion point, what does this mean? In the FileMaker developer world, how are most tasks easily divided?
Easily, different files, different systems, different projects, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, project A, project B, easily,
yeah,
but that doesn't scale very well.
it doesn't.
Hard to do something big that way.
Yeah. Well, and the tool gets in the way of some things, and so we take that division and we say, all right, then well, let's not have somebody work on the same set of tables schema-wise and layout-wise. We say, all right, well, let's have this group over here design UI and for the contact section, and over here we're going to go work in an entirely set of different schema that we're not going to bump into each other on. Because, again, FileMaker is unique in that simply developing UI elements is rarely just a design tool and drawing. It's like, oh, I need a button which needs schema, which needs a script, which needs fields, and all of a sudden we've touched every aspect of the UI environment, and we're kind of in each other's sandbox.
Well, you know, a little different approach here too is early on there's the planning phase, and if someone was to just jump into this and start building stuff, they could make a mess. So another individual can plan the project, and the one that builds it has blueprints to work off of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the instances where I think we did do this pretty effectively was last year around this time when Heather and I were working on the timesheet upload piece for ISS. I designed and built the whole UI for that, along with the scripting of okay, select this record, navigate to this, the basic scripting that was needed to just move around in the layout. And then Heather said, okay, I need a button here, just put the button there and we'll assign something to it later. And then Heather worked on all the scripting that did all the processing and all of the stuff and I'm not even sure what all
the schema related
right.
pieces.
And at least in that scenario, that model worked well. Because, for her stuff, all she needed was a button to trigger that stuff. So we were really able to split that and be working on both of those things simultaneously, and neither one needed the other.
Yeah.
It's not always the case.
So would you say that was like a division, a workflow division? Is that, like, if we try to abstract that out, would that be this part of workflow, that part of workflow, and we find our kind of Venn diagram overlap, and otherwise we're
little
working in free space?
but I would say the division was based on the knowledge necessary to do which set of tasks.
Okay, but that's why, not how you divide
Not how,
it.
right, okay. Yes, there was some overlap, it was a little bit like a Venn diagram, yeah.
Right, but were we dividing by parts of the workflow? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I've got steps 1, 2, 3, 4, you've got steps 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I've got steps 9, 10, right? Was that, I'm just trying to conceptualize it outside of the specific.
I think it was probably more akin to how we do some of the web development, where we have Josh, okay, design the layout, design the web page, what is this going to look like? And then put buttons here for us to do stuff later. And then Anthony or Jeff goes in and writes all of the back-end code to do the magic, and then at the last minute hooks it up to that button.
So less workflow, which would be kind of like linear, conceptually linear, and more stratification, right? I'm gonna work in this layer, you're gonna work in that layer, and we'll connect the layers at a later point,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, with bookkeeping, we've kind of taken our own parts, it's like, you're gonna work, man, you're gonna work on this part, I'm gonna work on this part, and then once all of our pieces are built, we're going back and hooking them all up so they interact together.
Right, but again, I'm trying to get to, what do you mean by part? By part, are you talking about module? Are you talking about steps of the process? Are you talking about layers of the technology?
We're steps of the process, so
Right. So that's
anything.
a different, so we got two different answers here, right? One is the layer, and the other one is the steps. Both of which I think are feasible, right? But it's two very different ways to divide it up, right? Where
Yeah.
I'm gonna be responsible for everything before dinner, and you're gonna be responsible for everything after dinner, versus I'm gonna be responsible for cooking the potatoes, and you're gonna be responsible for cooking the steak. Two different ways of dividing it up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is an interesting thing. I think had I chewed on that a little bit more, I might have changed my wording about what I mean by tasks. And this next question kind of highlights that. What are some tasks in FileMaker that are super difficult to divide and conquer? In that sense, I meant by task, type of thing we're doing versus I'm in the script editor and I'm in the script editor. I don't mean tasks like that. I mean, what parts of a project are really super difficult to divide and conquer at separate sides of the chasm, right? Make for better co-work.
I have, so I'll tell you, my instinctive answer to this is where we've got a single point of schema, a key table, if you will, or maybe a couple key tables. And those key tables are responsible for or integral to multiple workflows. And we're trying to deliver them simultaneously, right? Because I'm gonna add this field, or I'm gonna add this status logic or something and need it to work one particular way for my thing. And my peanut butter's in your chocolate, where you're trying to get this other thing done, and all of a sudden my status is overriding your status, and are my triggers updating your trigger when you don't need it to, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daisy and I just had a conversation yesterday about triggers. Yeah, and, I'll sometimes add a second trigger field.
Yeah.
Or other criteria on the trigger state in order to not overlap with what I don't know that someone else probably did. Yeah.
Which gets back to that whole, we feel like as FileMaker developers, we're entitled to own the whole stack from the very top all the way down to the very bottom. Hey, I need a field, I'm gonna go at it, right? And then like the classic FileMaker developer doesn't even worry about, is this system live in production and has 18 open record edits in that table right now? I'm gonna add it right now anyways.
That's right.
Right? So, it's, you know.
Well, and one of the classic things is, I need a full name field, maybe first name, last name, maybe last name, comma, first name. There's already 4 full name fields in this table. They're all slightly different. I'm not sure how they're being used, so I don't want to change any of them, so I'll just create another one. Right, and then
The dust bunny problem.
right, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 years later in the system, nobody knows why there are 5 fields there that seemingly all do the same thing, and the system is so has matured so much that everyone's afraid to delete any of those fields because there may be some report somewhere that's relying on them.
What will we break? Yeah.
And so you get this bloated thing of fields that are probably duplicates of each other, but who knows?
Yeah.
This field doesn't exist anywhere, but it was created to use in a sort,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So there are different times in the life cycle of a package that make this kind of discussion different. Like when you're first setting up a project, there's that problem. But then the maintenance phase, as it gets older, and not only are those programmers retired, they're dead, they've passed on from old age. This package requires a different kind of collaboration, and you have other considerations.
Yeah.
So, my other thought was that FileMaker is actively working against you. to do this kind of segregation. In fact, it's what we love about FileMaker is that not only do we tend to think of owning the whole stack, we by default own the whole stack.
Right.
We can do anything to anything, anytime. And if we're not careful, we can really mess it up.
Yeah.
So,
I find that in terms of types of tasks that are super difficult to divide and conquer, I think we tend to want to develop by opening up the tool and by grabbing a facet of the tool, whether it's a layout or the schema or whatever, and that's kind of where we start. And so in a sense, we all rush into the room at the same time and have that whole Three Stooges moment. And that's a pinch point. And then as Steve brought up a second ago, the rubber has hit the road, the timeline is coming, and we need to make this live, and we all exit the room together, and we all have that Three Stooges moment. And what is missing here is sort of the upfront bits of collaboration and orchestration where we say, all right, these things need to happen in this order, and you've kind of owned this part of the project, you've kind of owned this part of the project. That does take, and it feels like TDM at times, but that does take orchestration. That does take I'm not opening the tool and looking at it. We're actually whiteboarding out exactly the choreography that needs to happen here.
Interestingly, your first question about, when I first read that, how are tasks most easily divided, you know, my mind went pretty much to the same place that Robert's did. And I started thinking about the opposite, which was the planning phase, which is a great place to be collaborating.
Yeah.
If you are intending to divide up tasks and work with the team, you want everyone to be on the same page about the broad scope of what's happening and how it's going to work. And for me personally, some of the most invigorating and exciting things about my job have been in those meetings when we're planning. How's something going to work? You know,
Yeah.
what's the big picture? What kind of schema are we going to need? And how's it all going to interact with each other? And then there's a lot of tedium in the breaking it out and making it happen, but it's that planning part that is a really great opportunity for collaborating.
Yeah. It was a good moment where I think Robert was illustrating my point early, was just saying the tool itself isn't the collaboration thing. The collaboration needs to happen, the tool happens later. We're stuck with the tool, and its foibles and all that kind of stuff, but the collaboration part is not really, we're using this tool at the same time. We're not grabbing the same paint roller at the same time. We've actually split up the tasks in some kind of logical way.
But sometimes the collaboration may not be overlapping or even at the same time. It's one is laying the groundwork for another.
Yeah.
To you know, to make it easier for the second person to be able to be creative and not have roadblocks.
Yeah.
It's not that we're planning it together or we're building it together.
Yeah.
And I think you put your finger, Matt, on what I would really stand by as the problem with the second bullet point is time. And I might throw resources in, which are really functionally the same thing and by two different measures, right? If we don't have very much money to work with, it also means we don't have very much time, right? Or we're not billing for it, which is its own problem, right? So if we don't have very much money to work with, or we don't have very much time, or some combination of the two, that's when we hit those Three Stooges moments, right? Because we feel like we don't have time to collaborate. Or there's not time to just do things sequentially. I'm just gonna wait until you're done with your part, Heather, and then I'll start working on my part, right? If we have all the time in the world, well, we no problem staying out of each other's way, right? But it's when we're short on those time and resources that, and furthermore, that often gives you that feeling of, let's get started, let's do it, why haven't we done it yet?
Yeah.
Which is working directly against the problems we're creating.
You're exactly right. Yeah.
I think our most successful projects are the ones that have been, I wouldn't use the word planning, because that's kind of a process thing. I'd say they're the ones that were well designed. That is where you understand what it's gonna look like. You can't look at it because it doesn't exist yet. But here's what we think it should look like. And so everyone has that same picture, They may not understand it the exact same way, but they know we're building a transaction module. It's gonna produce these kinds of reports, and it needs to do it on this kind of time cycle. And you know, one siren singer inside of FileMaker has got that really nifty UI development environment, the layout editor. It is just calling your name. Hey, let's see, what would it look like? In the full stack world, you don't get to do that. I mean, you get there's a whole industry of graphic layout wireframers and other things that you have to use in order to visualize what the final product's gonna look like. We don't have that in FileMaker. We've got the layout thing, and the trouble with that is that every design you make is operational the minute you go into browse mode.
Yeah.
And so as long as it's already working, well, I'll just tweak it. And
Yeah.
it's a trap.
Yeah. The person who words come easily to rarely stops to think about whether they should say a thing. Right? Just throw it out there and see what happens, you know? It was not aimed at anyone in particular.
Nope, but I just take it because it's accurate.
So I threw this on there, and I think we've talked about this, which is, I think, the tool itself being sort of the rangy tool that it is and doing all kinds of things, kind of as a mechanism for allowing us to get work done, also is the challenge, right? The tool is not the collaboration. The collaboration is not the tool. And I wanted to jump into the next thought because we're cooking through time here. The next thought is, all right, so how do we minimize what we dislike about collaboration as a big concept? How do we maximize what we like about it? In other words, how does everyone get what they want? I have three thoughts again: perspective, methods, and tools. So, a long time ago, cutting edge quote from a long time ago: two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves, and a cord of three strands is not easily broken. Not so cutting edge quote, right? This was written in 900 BC. People have been perhaps thinking about this concept for quite some time. So maybe the issue isn't that we've never found collaboration to be helpful. Maybe the issue is really, instead of thinking about it as in terms of, this is a new thing, the government or this agency or the management is coming up with this new thing. Instead of thinking about it that way, maybe we think about our strategy and think about collaboration really being the same thing as a strategy. So a person's perspective, talking about perspective being one of these three things, a person's perspective can be ascertained from the answer to the question, what are we doing right now? So let's try that on for size. Anthony, what are we doing at this exact moment?
Sitting here and listening to you.
Exactly. Casey, what are we doing at this exact moment?
We're collaborating on how we should go forward.
Whoa, good brown-nosed kind of answer. Jordan, what are we doing at this exact moment?
We're listening to your brain trust presentation.
All right.
I think we're enhancing our chances for collective future profit.
I like that.
You get brownie point too.
Right, so are we sitting, are we attending, are we learning, are we discussing, are we participating? Sort of in a psychological sense, we can kind of figure out what it is we're thinking about what we're doing right now, right? So later, when we do development today, we're going to actually do some development today, what are we doing? Are we coding at that point? Are we co-developing? Are we directing? Are we collaborating?
We're trying to close tickets.
Trying to close tickets?
Trying to be profitable.
Yeah. So I submit to you that if 70% of the time, if you think, what am I doing right now? 70% or more, if that's your answer, I'm coding right now, we're doing it wrong, right? Because yes, trying to get tickets done is a really important thing. And we've got this stack and it needs to be this big. And so we look at that and that's where we're going with that. really, at some point, what we're really hoping to do is have that person weeding through that stack go, oh my gosh, there's like 3 things that are all in line, that are all restating the same problem. Let's put our finger on that pain point and fix that instead of just repetitively going through these tasks, right? I mean, that's the beginning thinking of let's collaborate and do this differently and do this better, right? So finding the right methods for collaboration that fit with our strategy. What methods for collaboration are too intrusive? What methods for collaboration are ineffective? What methods for collaboration are too one-sided? So thinking about methods, again, is one of those things of if collaboration comes down on you as feeling tedious, then it's probably something to do with the method and not collaboration in a sense as a whole, right? And so how do we pick better methods? I don't mean tools yet, I mean methods. Like how do we pick modalities for collaborating that aren't tedious, that don't come across as busy work or perfunctory? How do we align things so that the right thinking happens at the right time, and then the busy work that we need to know we need to do, we need to open up the tool, we need to work with it, but that does happen in its good turn when it makes sense to do that. Again, TPS reports and cover sheets, ineffective, right?
Well, if you're asking how we decide on collaboration methods, maybe we should collaborate on it.
It's a good idea.
So to that, I think unlike most people, I actually had a positive experience with collaboration in college. There was a course that we were all required to take where the entire course was centered around group work. The entire course was group work. And that being the case, the professor was very intentional about creating a space in which effective group work happened. Rather than just saying, okay, you 5 are going to do a group paper together, go for it. Like he would walk us through, how to make this a positive experience for everybody. And so one of the things we discussed in our group early on was like, what does each person like doing? What is each person good at? What does each person absolutely not want to do? And we ended up finding out that, like, for instance, I liked writing introductions and conclusions and really did not want to do the research to write the body of the paper. And then only to find out that there were other people in the group who hated writing introductions and conclusions and loved doing the research for the middle part of it.
But really, there's only one guy that ever was like that, right?
And so,
Not that many.
So once we figured that out, we kind of assigned these tasks up and said, okay, you're going to write this section and you're going to do this. And at the end, everybody got to do what they want to do. And at the end, everybody felt like they didn't do their part because nobody felt like they were dragging dead weight. No one was like, gosh, that was a miserable experience of writing that paper. They were all like, yeah, I kind of enjoyed that. I just don't feel like I contributed enough. And everybody in the group felt like that because, we had divvied things up. I think, another piece of the strategy, a recent example that I think worked out well was with all of the documentation and stuff for eTime 1.5. And planning that out, and having to delegate, I decided, okay, what is something that only I can do, and what is something that I can actually hand off to other people? And in that scenario, it was, okay, well, the content is something that only I can do, because I've been in all the meetings, and the only other people who have been in all the meetings are the people actually building the software. So they need to be doing that. The actual taking the content and getting it on a website and making sure the HTML looked right and that kind of thing, and dropping in screenshots and that kind of thing, I didn't have to do that. And so kind of that separation of, what am I good at and not, but also what can only I do, and how can I separate these things so that they can be done either simultaneously in parallel, or one of them can be done and then passed off onto somebody else.
Yeah. So you're, as a method, breaking up tasks and saying,
Yeah, and breaking up tasks that's, on the front end didn't look like they could be broken up.
yeah,
And then you realize, well, no, they actually can be. There's two different functional things here, and I can separate those out. And I don't have to do these. There are other people who are capable of doing this.
yeah,
And that example, I feel like really highlights, at least to me, what one of the biggest benefits to collaboration is, which is if you have a team of people who you trust, and if you kind of understand how they think, you kind of know how to work around each other without too much elbow bumping, you have a good grasp of everyone's strengths and weaknesses. And personally, with any successful collaboration events I've been a part of, it is that I am safe to pass off that which I cannot do effectively. So when Eric and I work together, he often pitches me what he needs, and then I come up with, the interesting drawing that is fun to look at or is hyper communicative, and then I turn it back to him and I go, here's the text I put in, and he tells me it's misspelled and it's poor grammar and it's too big or it's inaccurate and it's technically wrong. And that is my favorite thing, because I don't know, and I stress about that.
yeah,
Because writing is a weakness of mine. So the fact that I have someone who I trust to cover my blind spot allows me to work faster and more efficiently, because I don't need to worry about squirreling away time to cover that weak spot.
yeah, yeah,
Well, and I think another kind of faulty definition that we sometimes have of collaboration in our head is we think collaboration means that we are both working on the same thing but together, right? So we're both trying to grill the steaks at the same time. Rather than collaboration is, no, I'm doing the steaks, you're doing the potatoes, right?
Yeah.
To your
And-
example, you're not trying to grill steaks, you're trying to make dinner.
Right, right.
So dinner is different from a piece of raw meat that you got a really good deal on at Kroger's. It's something you can sit down at a table with your friends and family and enjoy. And so, yeah, you're hitting a really good example.
That's like, say, I can make a really good steak, but I can't start the grill. I need somebody to start the grill for me so I can make a really good steak, right?
And really, that's like one of the reasons why grade school collaboration ends up being so terrible, because there's rarely the step where somebody goes, hey, what are you good at? What are you bad at? What do you want to do?
This is
What
task
you
assigned.
don't want to do?
right,
And we can break that up. It's just the instructor telling a group of people to get together and
Work
then
together on it.
Yep.
yeah,
do it.
Remember your 1, 2, 1,
So,
2s, and all the ones
in-
do this and all the 2s do that.
In Eric's example, you described a team where the skill sets were pretty well defined. And so it was easy for you to say, this is what no one else but me can do. But where we sometimes run into difficulty and need to come up with better ways to collaborate are when we have more than one person on a team capable of doing the same task, right? And then it's a question of, well, both I and Robert can cook a steak for dinner, but am I gonna want it smoked?
Or do you want icing on it?
Right. I want some fancy decoration on it, exactly, a little bit of fondant in there.
You didn't say what kind of steak, it could be a steak cake.
That's right, it could look like
Wow,
a
what
steak
horrible
cake.
metaphor.
yeah. It's devolving badly.
Open the door.
I did,
Right.
I did.
I think there's two answers to these three questions that are fairly obviously wrong. And they're both instinctive answers, again, if we think about our child selves, our intuitive selves, if you will. You're either the person who always wants to tell everybody else how to do it, or you're the person who always wants to be told how to do it. Neither of those answers fit. as answers to these three questions, right? They will both consistently fail, all three. They're both too intrusive, they're not time effective, they're not output effective, et cetera, and they're both completely one-sided, right?
Yeah.
So those two answers just can't be the answer.
Yeah.
That someone will always tell me, or I will always be able to tell.
And that's what I associate with collaboration in my head.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
label it like that.
Can we guess about which camp you're in?
Oh, I can tell you, I'm definitely the bossy one.
That's right.
So-
100%.
So the last bullet point on this were perspective, methods, and tools. We do finally get to tools. And so to me, finding or building the right tools for collaboration is part of the collaborative thing. I don't know that we're going to land on a single set of tools, but we need to understand what benefit we want to pull down from those tools and use that to kind of come up with a criteria and choose the best tool, discard other tools, dismiss a really good candidate, right? And say, this isn't the best way to do this at this time. Yes, Robert?
I think part of the collaboration also is looking around the room and seeing who else has a piece in this and giving them that opportunity. And if we're gonna dismiss a good candidate, we at least need to hear them out.
Sure, absolutely. Because inherent in somebody's pet tool is a piece of what they envision and how they perceive collaboration being in there, right? And we're talking about collaborative tools. We're not just talking about, I'm not talking about FileMaker, right? Because FileMaker is the tool. We're using FileMaker. We're talking about the tool we use to collaborate. If in there, someone's going to say, I really prefer this, right? I don't want to fill up my email box because this is, counterproductive to me and takes too much time, that kind of thing.
Right, so let's use Slack.
So let's use Slack. Someone else is going to say, I don't like it. So inherent in somebody's really loving Slack is a token of why they think collaboration is a good thing. And so, yeah, we absolutely have to hear them out if we're going to discard it and find a better way to mutually land on something. But what I'm trying to drive at here is it doesn't make sense to go the other way around. It doesn't make sense to grab hold of a tool and say, no, this is our tool, and let's build methods around it and let's change our perspective. It actually kind of has to happen the same way. And so, Debbie was asking me, my wife was asking me, all right, so are you the subject matter expert on this, or what are you going to say about how you've gotten here? And I haven't gone to school to study collaboration, right? I would say that my subject matter comes from my subject matter of collaborating within FileMaker comes from the fact that I've been collaborating with a FileMaker developer for a really long time. I was about to say the number of years and decided not to. So there are some really unique things that come with trying to work on a project with Steve and have evolved over the years. There are things that we've done that are terrible. There are things that we've done that are great. And so part of the unique nature of the tool set of FileMaker produces these kinds of sharp, thorny issues that need to be dealt with. And part of the issue of the kind of programming that you end up doing because you work in that modality need to be worked on. And so I do feel a little bit like a subject matter expert about this slide, right? I feel at this point this is where I've come. I've thought about tools for a long time. I've read about methods. But really, at the end of the day, I think we need to gain perspective on what it is we're trying to accomplish at this moment. It doesn't have to be the same thing we're going to try in the midterm or in the long term, but in the short term, what are we trying to accomplish? What are we doing right now? What are the best methods for getting this done right now? And what tools can we use? And then with a mind towards where we're going in the midterm and in the long term, how do we evolve this tool set to actually allow us to do these other things? And then how do we let them evolve and to let us do these other things? So
Go ahead.
no,
I was going to ask, so at some point, when you start talking about tools, I start thinking about project management. A lot of tools that are used in collaborating and teams are really project management tools. In your mind, are you thinking of tools from that context, in that perspective of managing projects where we're collaborating, or are you, or as ways to improve the collaboration using project management tools, or are you thinking of tools that improve communication during collaboration, or are they one and the same?
Yes. I would answer yes. Certainly what I don't mean is tools like FileMaker as we use it as a tool, or PHP or MySQL or some of these other things, because those doesn't make any sense for me to say, hey, we're all switching access. It's dumb. I don't want to do it. What I mean by tools are collaborative tools. What do we use to collaborate? What do I use so that you know that I know that you know, right? That's really where I'm going with that.
I have a thought, taking the whole preparing supper analogy. I think it could be useful to people, for individuals to reflect on what they need, what communication points they need in order to effectively do the work they want to do. And so, I don't know if I don't know how to explain it, so I'll just use an analogy. So, I used to like try to plan out the whole week and buy groceries and be like, oh, I'll make this meal this evening, that'll be like a special fancy meal, and we have to be at the school, so we'll do something simple this night. And like, I would plan stuff out, but then invariably there'd be, oh, well, this has gone wrong at work, I can't get home until, Steve would be like, I can't get home until 8 p.m. And then that was the evening, like I had spent 90 minutes in the kitchen, trying to make the chicken just right. So of course, when it's sitting in the warming drawer for 45 minutes, it's not just right anymore.
That's fictitious.
Hypothetical.
Your chicken's always just right.
No one ever knows that.
So, I can, you can have an argument, or you can say, oh, well, that's frustrating, that's just gonna happen. But the real question is, okay, well, how do we prevent that going forward? What is the data that I need in order to do my job effectively? Specifically in this case, it's like, in general, I'm not gonna invest that kind of time into an evening meal unless there's actually a very specific reason. So I'm gonna focus on what can I get on the table in 30, 45 minutes, and always have something in the rotation that's fine simmering on the back of the cooktop, for example. So because it turns out that's kind of the accommodation that needs to happen to make the project feeding people be successful.
Right. It's you needed to be more situational.
Yes.
Not everything is a production. Sometimes it's just simply energy
Yes.
transfer.
Yeah.
I didn't actually taste it, but I got my calories, so let's move, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in order to get to that point, there had to be communication. I had to, instead of just being frustrated and continuing to repeat the same behavior, I plan every week, I order the groceries, I'm not getting respected, my work isn't valued. You could go down all those paths of thought, and I think that does transfer to work that's done at the company. Like, because nobody sees, what is it, Java or SQL, whatever's on the back side, like nobody sees all where the actual magic happens. People just look at the layout and are like, well, can we change the shade of this color, And you're like, what? That's what you got at Calvin time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it can be easy for people to have their work, to feel that it's being taken for granted, that people don't appreciate or understand it. And so, but the way out of that was to say, okay, well, what's the data that I need to make a decision? Well, the data that I needed from Steve was, what is a realistic expectation for work hours or for which evenings you can commit to, being home at this time? Or I feel like there's a better way of saying what I'm saying, and I'm using too many words. I apologize, but I needed data. I also needed the data to say, you know what, it's more important just to have the food on the table than to have a taste.
Right. So having a every other week meeting between you and Steve about what's going to happen for the next 2 weeks is maybe useful,
right,
in terms of, hey, let's discuss long-term where we want to be, but it's not very useful, 48 hours from now, because the situation changed, right?
Exactly. The situation did change. So the main question is, I think you won't get to the right method until employees can honestly say, what do I need? What are the data points that need to be communicated to me? What do I need to ask for? I think that's what I'm trying to get at. What do employees need to ask for, instead of just saying, well, I did this that I was told to execute. I did what I was asked to do, and then it sat on the shelf for 3 days, or it wasn't handled, or nobody seems to care. Like, that's unhelpful. Instead saying, what do I need?
And when do I need
I
it?
think that one of the things that you pointed out that I think is real important is reality, right? We have to be realistic in our expectations. And so in a tool, whatever that might be, one of the requirements for that in my mind would be the flexibility to deal with real world, issues and, the realistic expectations. Because Daisy and I were just looking at a document yesterday or the day before for this bookkeeping 2.0 module, right? And the document is poorly labeled bookkeeping 2.0 6-week plan.
Nice.
I've saved it.
And it was, I know, that's what I'm afraid
It's
of.
like, Heather does this, task, HB, task, DG, here's week 1,
Right.
here's week 2.
We're. Right, and so.
We're on week 60.
Yeah, and then there's another version of it that's 8-week. Right?
Nice.
That was getting a little bit more realistic, and it's all broken down, based on a perfect world, where nothing else came up. This is all that we could focus on for 40 hours a week, both of us.
Yeah.
For 6 or 8 weeks, but in reality, it's months. And so whatever we choose as a tool should be flexible enough to be able to deal with the reality and shifting priorities, fires that need to be put out. My husband told my granddaughter once that I was gonna be late because I was putting out a fire, and she said, but almost not a fireman. But anyway, we need a tool that is flexible enough to deal with that without making us feel bad when we look back at it and it says 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I
For
think
we're not gonna
starters,
wanna
not
do it.
put 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It's about 6 weeks when we roll it
Put a
out.
variable. Put a variable there, right?
or Parallel Vision 2020, and it's like, oh, where
I haven't taken it off the whiteboard.
We still have 6
Still off the
weeks.
whiteboard.
But I think another aspect of the flexibility in a tool that is needed, and there is a particular tool that I'm thinking of in my head.
Airtable.
No, it's actually not. The particular tool that I'm thinking of is Asana, and I'm not saying we should switch over to Asana. But one of the things that I like about it is the flexibility of the hierarchical structure in Asana, for instance, is very loose. Because when you're thinking of, okay, here's this task and here's this thing that needs to get done, and I was just in a meeting and this came up, and you're not thinking, okay, so that fits under this, which fits under this, which fits under this, so that's where I put it. You just need to have a tool where you can brain dump, and then once it's moved it, once it's all in there, then you can go, okay, this actually needs to move over here, and this, and that this subtask is actually a whole lot bigger than I thought, so I need to move it out, and it's going to become its own thing, and having that kind of flexibility of not having to know ahead of time where each thing fits in hierarchically and assign it to its place. Just go, I'm going to put it in there, and then we can move it around up or down the tree as we move forward and as this project develops, and having something that is
It's more malleable.
right, and I think malleable in a abstract sense, but I think also something that is malleable in an actual user experience, user interface sense. Not having to go edit, or move this ticket to a different project, and then, click this button to do this, and then add notes, like all of that is very kind of rigid. Just being able to go, I just need, the flexibility of a piece of paper to go circle, line, move, that kind of thing. Or the flexibility of like a text document, right? Where you can just copy and paste and move stuff around wherever you need to, and not have to worry about a strict database structure getting in the way of you trying to do your work and put stuff where it needs to go.
Yeah, I don't think we want to see a tool that introduces unnecessary bureaucracy.
Right.
And
So like, is this a
complexity.
ticket, or is it a task, or is it a storyline, or is it like, I don't know, it's something that needs to get done. Like,
Right.
let me just like put it somewhere without having to think like, which one of these is it? And like,
And then whoever,
it's like, let me put it in there, and then if I realize, oh, well, this actually is like a subplot to this ticket or whatever, like,
Right.
then 2 weeks from now I can put it there. But I shouldn't have to I shouldn't have to make that decision.
Yeah.
I get one
Upfront.
email that says, this doesn't work.
Yeah. All right, well, we are at an hour 10, so we have more slides, but I think I also planned that we could land the plane here. So I think it's a good land the plane part. What I want to kind of bring out of this, though, is that I feel like we're going to land on some tools for making our collaboration a little bit better, having started with a perspective that says, well, what do I want to benefit? What do I want to get out of this collaboration? Kind of Heather's analogy of, it doesn't make sense for me to say, let's create a schedule and rigidly stick to the schedule, and that's how we solve the problem. Actually, we need to come up with a plan that's a little bit more flexible and malleable. So from our FileMaker guys, from our non-FileMaker guys, we need to kind of think about collaborating together in ways that take these situational things that happen into consideration and realize that, yes, we've got some tool constraints, but we also have some thoughts we need to put behind how we organize the next bit of projects so that those tool constraints and our modalities kind of get taken into consideration and we land at a happier spot. And the goal here is not to say, I want collaboration for collaboration's sake. I think the goal here is to say, as we finish up these really large-scale projects and learn new things, how do we turn this into an arrow in our quiver, as opposed to, well, every time we build an accounting piece, it's just simply going to take this long. Well, I don't know that it needs
As
to.
opposed to the I Survived t-shirt.
Right, yeah. Right.
So it turned into an arrow in the quiver instead of like, I got this scar.
Yeah, I got a scar, I lived, I'm going to go back out there. So yeah, I want to take some of these perspectives that we have, and I want to turn those into, let's come up with methods, and then I want to kind of land on a tool or tools that we use to kind of help us facilitate that. And that's the point. That's the point of discussing collaboration at this level. The part two of this, I think, I had planned, and we'll do it some other time, is sort of having a fake exercise in how do we arrive at what is a good tool or not, right? How do we sort of philosophically walk through that? And then another part of this at some point we need to look at the tools we use, figure out how we use them, how we misuse them, how we would like for them to be used, and figure out if there's something to be done about that or if we need to throw something away and start over or whatever. But I think this is an important thing to kind of get some of the baggage of what collaboration means out of the way and kind of look towards what we appreciate it. So thanks for joining the Brain Trust. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining out there in the Brain Trust. And we hope to be back with the Public Brain Trust very soon. Keep posted. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Harmonic Software Production Studios monthly public brain trust. Be sure to join us next month. Just go to our website or go to our YouTube channel, and we'll give you all that information there as it becomes available.